Jessica Stutzman, and welcome back to the Millcreek Government Channel. Recycling is important, but at times confusing or frustrating. What is acceptable recycling can differ from community to community, and rules about recycling have changed over time. But don't give up just yet. Recycling reduces waste sent to landfills, conserves natural resources, reduces pollution, and creates jobs. Joining us today to explain how this gets recycled into that is Brittany Preshak, Sustainability Coordinator for Erie County Department of Planning and Community Development. Brittany, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Jessie. I always love coming here.
Good. Well, what I wanted to talk about, and we've touched so many times on what is recyclable, what is not recyclable, but I really want to inspire passion for recycling back in our viewers today. I don't want them to think that the recycling process is broken or that the loop is broken. It's not broken, and you and I know that. So what I want to do is just really inspire our viewers.
Sure.
Okay, so the million-dollar question, do items that we place curbside actually get recycled?
And yes, they absolutely do. As long as you are putting the right items in that bin, they are going to end up in through a recycling process. So yes, they do end up actually getting recycled.
And Brittany, I know you and I have gone on tours together of the MRF, which is the Material Recovery Facility. We've gone on tours to Cleveland, to Pittsburgh, to Buffalo, and ironically, I have found, and sometimes I have to hunt for it, but I have found the Erie Times News on top of the recycling pile, or laying on the ground, being ready to be put onto the conveyor belt. So from my own experience, I can tell you that the Millcreek Township Recycling is making it to its final destination to be recycled and to have that second life. So what I want to do now is tell people, a lot of people ask me, well, what does a plastic bottle get turned into, or what does a tire get turned into? So I want to talk about the process and then that end result of what is made new from that end of life product that we were using before. So regarding plastics, not all plastics are alike, and not all plastics can be recycled. So let's just touch quickly on what plastics can be recycled, and then what's that process and what are they turned into?
Sure. So I know a lot of folks are familiar with the plastic number system, right? It's a number usually around a triangle. Unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily mean an item is recyclable. What we really want folks to focus on is the type of container. That tells us more about whether or not it can be properly sorted, but also then recycled. And so we're really focusing on bottle type shapes. So bottles, jugs, and jars. And in Millcreek Township, tubs are still accepted. And so when we look at that, you're looking at a traditional bottle type shape that comes up to a little bit narrow of a lid with a cap that twists on. So milk jugs, water bottles, soda pop bottles, laundry jugs. When we're looking at the tubs, it's a container that snaps the lid on. So we don't want your snack container that was from a to-go something. That's not going to be a tub, and that's not an acceptable recyclable. So think bottle, jug, jar, and tub.
Okay, and a lot of these things are found in your grocery store. And so when people tell me that they have plastic lawn furniture, plastic children's toys, or plastic hoses, those are not recyclable, but I say, you don't find those at the grocery store. That's not what we're looking for. So how do plastics get recycled into a new item?
Sure. So first off, when you put anything in your recycling bin, it has to go through a sorting process. We have single stream recycling in most of our communities, which means anything that could be recycled goes into one container. Well, in order to actually recycle the items, we have to re-separate them. So that's what that material recovery facility, or MRF, that you had mentioned before is. That's the source or the process of actually sorting everything. So once our plastic is actually separated out, normally you'll actually see it go into plastic ones, which is more of your bottle and jar shapes. A lot of our jugs, they're different colors, maybe a little thicker plastic. Those are our number 2s. Those actually get recycled into 2 different types of products, or 2 different types of plastic. But the same process is very similar for both. So we're basically going to shred that plastic down into smaller pieces like cornflakes almost. A little bit smaller pieces. It makes it easier to actually clean them, process them, and then melt them down once they get to the space or the business that wants to recycle them. And that process of breaking it down can actually be a middle before you even get to the final business that's going to buy those sort of plastic flakes and then turn them into something new. And a lot of times with plastics, we do what's called downcycling. It's not really going to go into a new plastic bottle. It's going to go into a different product that's a little lower quality, perhaps. So one of the most common things that actually plastic gets reused into or recycled into is fleece. Fleece jackets. It's the same type of stuffing that goes into sleeping bags. Those types of items are really what we're looking at for plastic recycling. Other things, so if you get a stuffed animal, that's fleece stuffing that's inside of them, that probably came from some kind of a plastic bottle or container. Other examples, actually, they can actually make detergent bottles. Laundry soap bottles can be made out of recycled plastic, so it's not 100% recycled plastic, but a little bit of another bottle could have gone into making it. So it's sort of a mixed recycled content.
And there are often times on your water bottles, the labels. Do you need to remove those ahead of time?
No. So most of those labels, and really we don't tell folks to remove labels on any kind of recycled container. Most of those are either a paper product that'll burn off in the process, or it's a plastic that can just be removed. So you don't have to worry about taking the labels off of them. And then even the other question we usually get with plastics is the cap. What do I do with that? So actually these days we tell folks leave that cap on it. You don't necessarily have to squish out the air anymore. They actually perforate a lot of those plastic bottles, so you don't have to worry about pressure getting in there and popping that lid off. So caps go right back on the bottle. Make sure you screw it back on top. When it gets to the recycling company and they go through that shredding process, different types of plastics will actually have a different buoyancy. So some may sink in water and some will float, and they use that process to then separate those two different types of plastics.
Wonderful, and that was such a good explanation. I did hear, and I think this is super neat, but I did hear that some companies, if they are using plastic bottles to make the fleece, they're not advertising that it's made out of recycled content. And I think that's strange, because I think as a marketing tactic and with everybody being so environmentally conscious, I think that's strange that you wouldn't want to tell people. But that is very much the case, where you may not know that the fleece sweatshirt you have is made out of recycled content.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. The stuff that we want to recycle is usually labeled that it's recyclable, but sometimes when we buy items that you wouldn't have ever thought could be or were used or made out of recycled material, we don't see that label on there.
Right, right. An interesting statistic, according to the EPA, by recycling 1 ton of paper, we save 17 trees, 7,000 gallons of water, and 463 gallons of oil. How are paper products, which is office paper or newspaper or cardboard, how are those paper products recycled?
Sure. Similar process actually to the plastic, which is kind of interesting. So in paper, you actually have different qualities of paper. Similar in the plastics, we have different types of plastics. So you can actually have what's called high-grade office paper. That's a specific type of paper product and can be recycled into other specific types of paper-related products. And then you might have a mixed paper, which is magazines, maybe some construction paper, postcards, junk mail, usually a little bit of the shinier stuff. That can only be recycled into certain products as well. So they'll actually separate out the different types of quality of paper first. And then it gets shredded. And then they actually add water and a little bit of chemical to it, and they call it a pulp. So it ends up almost looking like Play-Doh, kind of, when it goes through the process. So the idea there is they're getting everything mixed down, they're breaking it down into smaller pieces, almost fibers of the paper. And then once that process goes through, they can kind of remove the ink from it. So then you still get white paper, or at least just no ink in that paper process. They're able to actually remove staples, paper clips, small pieces of metal like that during the process. You don't have to worry about taking those out. Though paper clips are reusable, so we kind of want to make sure we don't keep putting those in the recycling bin. But once they've got that pulp material, they actually spray it down onto sort of a conveyor belt. And the idea there is you're going to flatten it. A lot of that water will start to drip off, but they're going to heat it to make sure it dries. And while they're doing that, they sort of roll it. So they're going to flatten it. All the fibers start to meld together. And then you end up almost with new paper at the end in rolls.
And I get great questions from our residents. And one that I've been asked is, can we recycle sticky notes, because there's like that sticky adhesive material on the back. So I know typically for any recycling process, a sticky note by itself is just too small. But you know, if you've got a large document and there are sticky notes, you know, throughout the document, do they need removed, and is that sticky adhesive a problem?
So actually in the pulping process or the paper recycling process, the adhesive actually can get removed. It doesn't cause that much of an issue. And it's the same reason actually that you don't have to take the tape off of things. And so really you don't have to worry about the adhesive part from the sticky notes.
I'm glad you mentioned the tape, because I do get that question a lot for cardboard boxes. Do I need to remove the tape? And you just answered that for us. Another interesting tidbit or something I want to share from our residents, we hold a shredding event every single year in Millcreek Township at the Mill Fair Compost Center. And I wanted to know, when we send our shredding off, what is it turned into? And so the feedback I got from our shredder was that it's turned into like tissues, like you know, that you would use to, you know, blow your nose or whatever. And someone said, "Oh my God, doesn't that hurt?" And I said, "Why would that hurt?" And they said, "Well, because you're recycling all of the staples in the paper and turning it into tissue. Wouldn't that hurt your nose? Wouldn't that be scratchy?" And I said, "No, they have a way to remove that." Yeah. So, but that was very cute. That was a nice observation. So, and again, I just want to go back to cardboard, and cardboard is a fiber, a type of paper fiber. So is that process the same for recycling cardboard as it is regular paper?
It is the same basic process. The difference would be in what it gets turned into. So for your traditional paper products, you might get, again, same as plastic, some paper that is recycled content paper, 10%, 30%, 50% recycled content paper. So you might get that kind of a mixture, but then you still get sort of, again, it's that downcycling. It goes to a little bit lower quality product. So for paper, traditional paper, coffee filters, lampshades, masking tape, and then your paper towel or your tissues, paper towels, those types of things are all made out of traditionally the recycled result of paper. For cardboard, when it gets downcycled, it's thicker, so they can actually still make sort of what they call paper board or chipboard, and these are your cereal boxes, maybe your some envelopes that might end up being that little bit thicker piece. So that's kind of where that difference is.
Okay, cereal boxes, envelopes. I know shoe boxes are included in that, and we always want to send quality material, because that's something that you've been focusing heavily on, is quality over quantity of recycling. And so one thing I want to touch on are food soiled containers, or so like, and specifically pizza boxes.
Right. Pizza boxes are notoriously a problem, especially on our college and university campuses. So actually anything that's got food soil, especially because it's oil based, that actually can cause problems in the pulping process, because it's difficult. Oil and water don't mix very well, and so when you try and pulp it, you may not actually get a good quality product out of it. So if you've got any kind of donut boxes, cake boxes, pizza boxes that have some kind of food residue left on them, we want to make sure we throw that part of it away. Pizza boxes, if the top doesn't have any cheese, any pepperoni, or any grease on it, you can actually tear that top part off, recycle the good part, and then toss the bottom part.
And I use the same rule of thumb to apply to like a brown paper bag. Sometimes you go out for lunch and go through a takeout restaurant, and sometimes I get the brown paper bag, and whatever food you're getting, sometimes it's soiled at the bottom, sometimes it's not. So, and something else I want to leave our viewers with: making 1 ton of virgin cardboard requires 3 tons of trees.
Wow, it's a lot.
Right. So, and that's why the recycling process is still so important, but that's why we really want to emphasize sending clean material.
Yes, absolutely. And just re-emphasizing that recycling does work. I mean, we can easily see it in the numbers that as you're making new products, it's much better. It saves energy, it saves costs, it saves natural resources, that we're actually including this recycling process when we make new products.
Okay, just moving on down the single stream recycling line, we have beverage and food cans. What are those? Those are metal cans, but what are they made out of?
So it just depends. They're usually made out of steel and tin mix, or all steel, all tin, or aluminum. Those are a couple of the different types of metals that are used in cans.
Okay, and what does the recovery process look like for that?
Sure. So usually just something to think about. The steel cans that usually your soup or your canned vegetables come in, that tin piece is in there actually to help cut down on any rust potential, and then as well as the food contamination. So that's why they usually add that in there. But the tin part actually is burnt away during the recycling process, as well as that paper label that's on the outside. So you don't have to worry about that piece. But they, again, shred it down to its smaller pieces. It gets pressure washed, cleaned, and then it gets melted down before it ends up becoming a new recycled product.
Okay, and I get this question all the time. I'm sure you do too. What do we do with the lid?
So usually, especially on the tin cans, I tell folks to make sure you rinse it off, rinse the whole can out, and then I put it back into the container. One thing you'll notice is obviously that lid is now slipping, it can slip in and out of the container. So if you can squeeze a little bit so it's more of an oval shape at the top, that keeps that lid secure at the bottom of it, and that way you won't lose the lid and that edge won't cut someone.
Okay, and steel cans can be recycled infinitely with no loss of quality. So it's really, really important to recover that particular material.
Absolutely.
And just moving on down the line, I want to talk about plastic bags. We have recently seen a trend in, I know we're a windy city, but we really shouldn't bag our recycling. And what's the reason for that?
Sure. So really what happens when you go through a single stream process and into a sorting facility is one thing, they have to actually open those bags to get to the materials inside. And plastic bags, they cause a couple of different problems during the sorting process. For one thing, they can't see into the bag, so even though it might be white, if it's not transparent enough to see in it, they don't know if it's true recycling. It's not worth it to even try and open that bag. It'll end up going to a landfill. It adds labor cost to it, having to open up every single one of those bags in order to get all the materials out of it. But then the other issue actually is if that bag doesn't get removed from that conveyor belt, whether it's a bag of grocery bags that someone tried to recycle or bagged recycling, the first machine that it hits is what sorts out our paper and our cardboard. And it has a couple of different wheels on it that are meant to push flat cardboard objects up, and then it actually lets your bottles and cans fall between those wheels. And the plastic bags fill the gaps between the wheels because they're tanglers. That's what we call them. They're called tanglers. And so they actually get stuck in there, wrap around, and then they actually decrease the ability of some of those bottles and cans to fall through, causing separation problems. So now your cardboard actually also contains plastic bottles, aluminum cans. They just didn't get separated out properly.
Okay, and so what do we want to do with the plastic bags instead?
Sure. So for one thing, we definitely want to see loose recyclables in those bins. That's why a lot of communities have gone to more of a toter style, where the lid is actually connected to the bin, so that again doesn't blow down the street to your neighbor's house. And even in the open style bins, again, we still want that loose recycling as best we can. Try and put your heavier stuff on top, put the paper products underneath. That'll help a little bit with the wind. But as far as what to do with those plastic bags, the best place is to actually take them back to drop-off sites. All of our grocery stores have a bin set up specifically to take plastic films, which is awesome because it's not just grocery bags. It's actually grocery bags, bread bags, those produce bags, and then they even take the plastic wrap that comes off of toilet paper rolls or paper towel rolls, as well as bubble wrap. So a lot of that plastic film that we weren't even trying to recycle, there is actually a way to recycle it. So they take all those plastic films. Grocery stores, Walmart, Lowe's, a lot of our big box stores have containers for those.
And they're usually in the front of the store. They're very easy to locate. And the other question I get, do those bins of plastic bags, do those actually get recycled?
And they do. Actually, what's nice is because you as a consumer are part of the separation process, now you've got good, clean, quality material that does not have to be processed. And so there's a company out there, and there's probably a couple, but Trex is one of them. And what they actually do is they take the plastic film, they shred it, but then they actually turn it into compressed lumber, which is used for decking or furniture that's outside. It lasts a lot longer than wood products. The durability is better on it. It's a little more expensive, but it's just because it lasts that while. But that's one of the great recycling content type materials out there.
I'm so happy about that. And like you said, with making residents a part of the source separating process, you know that you're getting clean material, because a resident isn't going to throw in a plastic bag and in the same motion throw in an aluminum can. So moving away from some of our more traditional recyclable items, I want to talk about some other things. And one of those, again, I do get a lot of questions about recycling tires. I know we do recycle tires at our special collection event, and I know you also recycle tires at your convenience center.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about tires.
Yeah, so tires are interesting. For one thing, they used to be accepted at landfills. That's where people would take their tires to be disposed of. So now, though, if any landfills actually accept a tire, they have to be quartered, which means split down both sides, basically. The idea is you've got that ring on the inside, and if water gets trapped in there, then it never actually can get dumped out because it just sits in that ring. And that's a breeding ground for mosquitoes and rodents, all of those issues when it's dumped outside or left in the open. Most landfills don't actually accept them anymore, so what we'd rather see you do is give them back at the auto parts store where you're buying your new tires, or the auto dealer, whoever's putting on your new tires, they'll take them back and recycle them, bring them to your event. You can bring them to the county events. But what happens with them is they actually shred them down. Again, a lot of plastic material or recyclable material is shredded. They shred it down and they turn it into a couple different things. The most common thing is a ground rubber product, and the idea is it's rubber mulching. They use it in a lot of playgrounds. It's a lot safer. It lasts a lot longer. They've actually used that type of product and turned it into sports bases like basketball courts, or even track field or tracks for track and field, those kinds of items. So it can actually be recycled.
And the other one I thought was very interesting was I heard that it was turned into like dumbbell weights. So that was when I contacted our tire recycling company. In the first two they did mention as well, but the dumbbell weights I thought were very, very interesting. So, and we're running close to the end of our show here, but I do want to talk about used oil. That's that's a household hazardous waste, so we want to be very careful with that.
Absolutely, and I know a lot of folks, I'm hoping everyone has heard this by now. Please definitely do not dump that down your drain or your storm system. The stormwater system never actually goes to a wastewater treatment facility, so it goes directly into the lake. And one of the problems we always have with that is 1 gallon of motor oil, actually, 4 quarts of oil, if you were to dump that in, it contaminates 1 million gallons of water. So just that simple, you dumping that 1 quart in, it can do a lot of damage. What we'd rather see is you bring it to a hazardous waste collection program, and what they do with it is they actually will filter it. So they can actually remove all of the buildup, any of the extra debris that's in it, and actually reuse that oil after it's filtered.
Wonderful. Brittany, we are at the end of our show here today. We have shared some really great examples of why recycling is so important and that the system is not broken. Do you have a takeaway message you want to leave our viewers with?
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone that like you said, recycling, it's not broken. It is still very important that we recycle the right items. We want that quality over quantity. And we know that the process is there and it definitely is happening. So please don't doubt it. Don't let that prevent you from actually participating in the recycling process.
Brittany, thank you so much for coming on our show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to be here.
Viewers, Brittany is an absolute wealth of knowledge. So if there is any question you have about recycling, what can be recycled, what can't be recycled, what does this item get turned into, Brittany is happy to answer any of those questions for you. Recycling is easy and it does make a difference. So we appreciate you watching the Millcreek Government Channel today, and until next time, have a great day.